talk about two projects in particular, the Victoria line and the subsurface line. I know there are people coming on after me that will give you a lot more detail, so I'm going to try and keep it quite strategic. Always a challenge for me. And I'm going to summarise with, kind of where I think the priorities, weaknesses, strengths, threats for this industry are, and critically what we want. So, a bit of background, as you know, we're the oldest metro in the world, 150 years old next year. More passengers, we're seeing huge growth, to which we've responded traditionally by just pumping out more trains. Our peaks are getting longer, our off-peaks are getting busier, our weekends are getting busier. We've managed the fallout of the PPP, which has been hugely expensive for us, cost us several £billion, which we never had in the first place. We're still paying for that. And critically, with our investment, we've got to ensure value for money. So, asset condition, we've got signalling that dates back long time. We've just done a signal cabin at Edgware Road, which is up to 1927. And that was a job and a half. Some of our trains are the oldest trains in Europe. And you can see the demand there has grown and continues to grow. There's a pointer here. So it's doubled basically since 1984, where it was 600 million a day. And basically we're talking about well over 1.2 billion passengers a year. And we're currently moving in our busiest times 4.2 million passengers a day. Last December we broke all our records for the weekend, weekday and the week. So we've got to respond somehow. We can't build new tunnels. Generationally, Transport for London builds a tunnel, every 25 years. Crossrail is this one, and there won't be another one for a long time because they're just so expensive. So we've just got to try and squeeze more out of the infrastructure. Our performance, which is what we get judged on, is, and this is a big theme I'm going to return to. So you can see we've brought down journey time, and we're pumping out more train kilometres. And that's forecast to increase. This has been a fantastic achievement, actually, when you think we're doing it on such old infrastructure. And at the same time, we brought customer satisfaction up, and they said that was impossible, those three things: more trains, faster journeys, more crowding, and greater customer satisfaction. So we're very proud of that. We're also running, despite what you may read and hear, a more reliable railway than we ever have in our history, although we need to do better. Because the trouble with this demand is whatever failures you have are just hugely magnified. So if you take the Victoria line, which has far more trains than platforms, you get a delay and it only has to be 30 seconds and instantly trains are backing up, platforms are getting crowded, passengers are pushing passenger alarms, and off it goes. There is just no slack in the system. So one of my themes from today is I need and I demand from the industry reliability, and I haven't had it up to now. We are a very disappointed customer when it comes to reliability. Very disappointed. Here's our upgrade programme. Interestingly, when I first started back at LU in 2006, this was all aspirational. We're right in the middle of it now. Jubilee Line has just been turned on. I know people are going to talk about that. Huge success. Moving block system first on LU. Victoria Line's right in the middle of it. Very close to the end now. Northern Line, well underway. And the subsurface railway, well underway, and the big capacity station schemes, the ones we're doing with Crossrail, Tottenham Court Road, Bond Street, Paddington, etc., because you can't have this level of increased capacity without doing a lot of work at your stations. And those are, roughly speaking, a typical station upgrade for us is 300, 400, 500 million pounds, just because of the complexities and the challenges of doing it in London. And obviously the next generation of upgrades then come around. This is just a never-ending story, because the Central Line, which was just to the left of this, will be due for its upgrade in the mid-20s. Those trains are not lasting the full 40 years. They're taking huge investment as we speak, which is suboptimal. So they'll be renewed, and we've got to do the Piccadilly and the Bakerloo. So I just wanted to talk about this a minute. It's what I call the zone. I don't think it comes on next. There you go. So we have a number of priorities that we've got to achieve. It's not the traditional time, cost, quality that project managers understand. It's that, but it's more. Clearly, on a system like ours, where we're moving 4 to 5 million passengers every day, safety has to remain central to everything we do. And I get incredibly irritated, very irritated, when people talk about safety, about being an add-on, something they're going to look at separately, something that's going to happen when Joe Bloggs in Committee ZY reviews it. Safety comes from the bricks. It comes from the minute people think about something, the minute they design it, when they write code, when they do installation. And it's still seen by far too many people as something that's added on by some committee or some review. Okay, the best safety is there, and the review is just a tick in the box. So it's very important for us. Then we've got, for the first time in our funding history, our delivery, those upgrade programs I spoke about in the stations are now linked to dates and money. In other words, we've got a contract, in a sense, with government that says, here's the money, but in return we want this output by this date, and that's been a very big step for us. So the dates for us are very important because they're linked to having a seat at the table for the next spending round, which is starting later this year. We've got huge scrutiny. My budget is around £1.4 billion a year, 8 billion over 5 years, and you don't get that kind of money without the most incredible oversight scrutiny. And believe you me, we have huge scrutiny and oversight, and it's justifiable. I don't fight it for 1 second. I welcome it because I want to prove to everybody that we're a very efficient, cost-effective client organisation. But nevertheless, I have huge downward pressure on my cost base, again, just to prove value for money. So unit costs are something we're obsessed with. And you know, the unit cost for resignaling, when you try and explain it to the non-experts, they just don't understand it. You know, if you say to them per kilometre, a good price is 3 to 4 million, they think you're joking, but it is a good price, you know, and you try and explain to them, why is that? What does it buy you? It's only computers and cables and black boxes, isn't it? Effectively, that's what it is. And I think the industry has a huge challenge in getting this kit more reliable, quicker to install, and cheaper. If it doesn't, then I guess we'll all have to go elsewhere. Closures has been a huge issue for us, huge issue because we, under the PPP, which I'll talk about in a minute, closures were unconstrained. And if you unconstrain something, it's the first place any delivery team will go to. You know, it's not something I blame them for. It was just a place to go to when they're under pressure. What's the levers you can pull as a project manager? You don't have loads more money, you don't have loads more people. I know, I have loads more closures. So closures became a currency. Unfortunately, it angered all our customers justifiably, and our stakeholders were mad at us because we're closing the railway, you know, and every weekend. So for us, that's a big currency as well. How can you do this without closing the railway all the time? And finally, but not last, is the reliability. You know, performance for us is reliability as much as anything else, and you cannot any longer install stuff on a very busy operational railway with those numbers when reliability isn't as important as safety, as important as cost, as important as dates. So we increasingly talk about RAMs and RAM-D because we want to start getting this concept that, as well as safety being in the bricks, it's reliability. It can't be an add-on. And far too often we've had to add it on heroically, but it's not optimal. So world-class delivery for us is hitting all 5 of those, and it is a big challenge, believe you me. Very few organisations can do that, and frankly, we're on a journey to get there. So, talk about our upgrade plan. It's largely around capacity, as I've spoken about, but also about rebuilding those wonderful stations. And it's, in addition, accessibility is very important. We've got an ageing population, we've got more people who have mobility, who travel with huge suitcases, so accessibility for us is a big deal, but it's a very expensive big deal. You know, by the time you put a typical lift with a vertical tunnel in, you're talking several £1 million. You know, if you've got 270 stations, of which half are underground or deep tube, then you're talking about a massive bill. So accessibility for us is a big issue, but we're trying to get there. So what we're doing now is when we rebuild a station, remodel a station, we put accessibility in. Cooling is a big issue on the underground. It's getting hotter and hotter, warmer climates, drier summers. This is going to be another long hot summer. It started already. We've got 1 million more people coming this summer to use our system. So for us, cooling's a big issue. And of course, trying to get that integrated onto narrow, deep tube trains where you don't have anywhere to dump the heat is one of our biggest challenges. And obviously, we can't renew everything. So in the meantime, we've got to keep all the old stuff going, the stuff that dates back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It is remarkable. So there's some pictures of the upgrades. People are going to talk about all this later, but lots of trains, lots of signalling, lots of control centres, lots of nice kit. PPP approach, as I said, it encouraged reliability on closures and didn't really do much for us and caused a huge backlash now against closures in anything we do. And it's right. I mean, if you talk to the customers, they are very angry when you take away their railway. It's something they look for, they need, they want, they rely on, and you take it away from them. It doesn't make you very popular. So our subsurface programme is now trying to get minimal closures. We've looking at blockades. The previous leadership regime at TfL, LU, turned their face against blockades. But frankly, we are now saying if the choice is between shutting something down for 3 months and having 150 weekends, that's a discussion we're happy to have. And I think that's hugely important in driving some reality around what we can do, because I'm a big fan of just getting things done, getting in there with military precision and getting out. As opposed to keep going back, it's much more cost efficient and effective. But again, we need to define it up front to see what we can do. So the key objective post-PPP is to make sure we keep disruption to a minimum. We've done a lot of benchmarking. We've been to Madrid. We've been literally to most railways around the world to see what they do, how they do it, and learn the lessons of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And all the stuff about off-site testing, passive testing, overlay, all that stuff is now part and parcel of what we do and specify. So just want to talk about a couple of the upgrades in a bit more detail. Victoria Line, the world's first automatic railway, and had a number of notable successes. It was opened in 67, 68, as I said, the world's first ATO railway, and we were the world's first to have to renew an ATO railway, so there's a lot of lessons learned around that, I can tell you. We put a new distance-to-go radio system on it, supplied by Invensys, and it very importantly, it did use overlay from the start, and that was a huge differentiator for us, because it meant that if you wanted to test a new train with a new signal, you could literally bring it out at night without extensive over and backing, and that was a big boon to the project. And a lot of signaling asset replacement, which I'm going to talk about as well. So there you can see pictures of the new control system at Osborne House. New train, nice new train, typical deep tube train, supplied by Bombardier. 47 of them. And in the timetable that we're going to bring in, we're just bringing in 30 TPH next month, which will be a big step up. Then, sorry, 30 TPH next month. Then from next January, 33 trains an hour, which will be kind of the sound barrier for us. We've never run more than 30 TPH. So that's a big step forward in our capacity. So 33 trains per hour next year. We've got a scheme of asset replacement, which is basically taking out the way the system worked. You had the equivalent of code generators and interlocking machines on old track circuits, and then we overlaid the new system on that. We've done all of that. We've now got to take away all the old track circuits and interlockings and replace them. So when you hear the Victoria Line is closed at weekends, typical weekend, this is what we do. And it's incredible how much we do. You know, you look at that, you're replacing 2 or 3 interlockings, 50, 60, 70 track circuits, rail gap indicators, block marker boards, you're wiring up to point machines. It's a lot of work in a weekend, a lot of work in a weekend. And this is stuff, sadly, you can't do at nights. What we do now is over and back, but we all the track circuits to make sure we de-risked it, but you just can't do that stuff at nights. So a lot of work there. This is one of the graphs I'm most proud of, because this system has come from a very, very bad place. You can see that the reliability there, when we first switched it on, just look at that in terms of mean distance between service affecting failures. You know, we were literally struggling to get 200, 300, you know, a couple of round trips. I think the first target we set was 5 round trips, and we weren't even getting that. And just look how far it's come. It's the blue line. You know, this is now approaching world-class reliability, and it's just been the most incredible journey we've all been on. I think we've all aged about 50 years in this. Whoops. But you can see that the 28 day, which is a very important number, it's not a spot number, is over 32,000 kilometres. And not forgetting that includes the train-borne signalling, is absolutely remarkable, given where that train and where that signalling came from. And that implies a train number of well over 60,000 and a signalling number of pretty close to that. So that has been a remarkable feat. And you can see the Duane predictions there, which we're bettering. And here's the signalling growth for both train-borne, which is up here. Again, there was the prediction, and trackside, and it did judder around here, but it's now 250, 300 hours. And to get the equivalent MDBF number, you multiply by about 30. So you can see that sort of 90,000 equivalent MDBF for the train-borne signalling, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's some lessons there around what to do and how to do it. And one of the things is that system was rewritten by people with an aerospace background. When we spoke to them, we said, what was the main difference? And they said, well, in railways, you guys are really good at safety, so you get all your safety requirements down, and they're quite narrow, and if something is outside that envelope, it puts the anchors on. If an aircraft's up there, any reliability impact, it falls out of the sky. So when we redid this, we looked at the envelope, and it was much, much, much bigger. The requirements were like times 100. But it was worth it because you're not seeing anything now that's going to stop the system. Interesting. And then one of the key messages, one team, suppliers, operators, maintainers, project team, commercial people, all in one location. It's a real thing to behold, actually, this one. It's working well. Then the next project, the subsurface railway, which is 4 lines, the Met line, Circle, H&C and District, and these are critical points, these nasty, nasty junctions that have been there for a long time because no one's got the guts to address them, basically. And they, you know, these are some of the busiest junctions in the world. So the triangle junctions, we call it, is 1,200 train moves a day. We think it's the busiest junction in the world. You've got Baker Street, Edgware Road, Earls Court. These are places of huge complexity, and they cause constraints on the railway. So what we're looking with the train control system, a modern train control system, is to ease our way through those and get 32 TPH. These are the dates for the subsurface railway. I spoke earlier on about the departmental dates. This is our contract. We have to achieve these. The funding is linked to this. If we don't achieve these, very bad things happen to us. The scope of the whole subsurface programme, it's well over 4 billion just for that programme, which includes trains, 191 trains, the biggest train order in the world at the time it was let. Now the biggest signaling order in the world at the time it was let. Lots of infrastructure, huge amounts of infrastructure, power supplies, platform extensions, OPO CCTV, platform humps, train arresters, depots, all that stuff. And obviously combining that into a system, and there's the EFC, estimated final cost. And we've gone for a system with Bombardier City Flow, reliable train service, fully redundant, every lock, every screen. And there's the picture of the architecture. I'm sure Heikki and others will talk to you about that. But its block architecture is not that radically different from most of them. It's got train-borne stuff with train signalling, so train wire, wayside LAN, block centres called RATPs, regional ATP controllers, sort of ATS, ATO system. Now this is the interesting thing for us, because this is the business case, sort of the why we're doing it, which is the trains alone give you around a quarter uplift because they're bigger, longer, faster. But the big thing that gets you is the signalling. Just look at that capacity uplift you get from 32 pH, and that's why we're doing it. That's the business case. Clearly, if we can't do that, there's no reason to do it. Yeah. So that's really interesting, and if we can achieve that, and we have to, I mean, that's a huge tribute to the signalling industry, overcoming those critical pinch points around the system. There's the programme for the ATC rollout. We're kind of here. By the end of this year, we'll have all the A stocks removed on the Met line. So those S8 trains you see, S for subsurface, 8 for 8 car on the Met line will be coming through the city. Then we go around the H&C, then we go around the Circle, then we go around the District. And following that rollout, because a lot of legacy signalling has to be done for that, is the ATC programme, finishing in 2018. At which point, if I'm not already dead, I'll retire. There's a rollout. Not going to dwell on that, because I'm sure Heikki will talk about that. We spent a lot of time communicating to our customers, not as much as I wanted to, but we finally got the organisation to a good place. And we do have, you know, we Twitter, we Facebook, we have intranets, and it's been a huge success, actually. So when we close for a weekend, we have lots of photographs, images, movies, and we put them on the internet, and people can actually see what's been happening to their railway while it's been taken away from them. And we weren't doing enough of that earlier on, and it's been a huge success because people now understand what you do when you take it away, because before they just came and saw nothing different. They don't see the signalling, they don't see the control systems, they don't see the testing. So we need to do much more of this, but it's a good start. And obviously we have the Tube documentary as well, which has done something. So looking further ahead, what do we want to achieve after the subsurface when we come on to the next generation? Standardisation is very important for us. I guess the history of the underground, if you were to look on it in 50 years' time, would be 1 or 2 different types of train, maybe a big, wide subsurface train and a narrow, deep tube train, and potentially 1 or 2 different types of signalling, possibly interchangeable or interoperable with each other, but who knows. Air-conditioned, fully automated, and I'm not going to say what that is because we're in Purda, but certainly fully automated and taking advantage of technology. Cool, light, efficient. And the thing that we've learned is that you can't do this without bringing your people with you. So we can't do that kind of technology change on the railway without also changing our operating paradigm, our maintenance paradigm, because otherwise it just becomes a technology change in an island. And the key thing is reliability will be baked in. We can't anymore retrofit it. I think we'll all lose the will to live. It's just so difficult to take these schemes and heroically layer on reliability upgrades. And I know any scheme has reliability upgrades, but I'm talking about just fundamental stuff here. It's just, you just don't want to do it. It gets us all a bad reputation in the industry. So my summary, that's my 20 minutes, which is kind of lessons learned, where would I go again? I think we do a lot of work with other railways around the world, is that most of them are experiencing this combination of huge demand and the need for asset renewal. So what they're therefore doing is putting in CBTC, new trains, screen doors, just going for capacity. So that's a theme around the world. I think more than ever, we all talk about systems and systems integration, but we don't always preach it. I've rarely seen it actually practiced on projects. People talk about it a lot, but it does require fundamentally a systems approach where you take the people, the technology and the processes and you put them together. So there's no point bringing in a new system if you're going to keep the same rule book. It's just pointless. You might as well not bother, because all you do is end up bespoking the new system to the old way of doing things. So you've got to integrate people, processes and equipment. More than ever before, I think you've got to have early operator and maintainer involvement. That's fundamental. We've been very fortunate in LU that when the upgrade program was set up, we had over 100. You know, it's a lot of people, over 100 operators seconded to the projects to be seconded into teams, and that has really worked well because the operational interface has been a huge success. And we've had reviews where that's been quoted as being world-class in terms of the way we work with projects and operators. It's been really, really good. Migration is something that must be designed in. If you don't think about migration right at the beginning, you're dead in the water. You can't design a system or buy a system without fundamentally thinking, how am I going to bring this thing in? You know, and we've got lots of lessons about trying to bring in heroically huge chunks of the railway in one go, not thinking about over and backing, not thinking about testing strategies. You've just got to design in reliability at the beginning. And as a client, you've got to put it in your spec, you've got to think about it, the stage works. I mean, these projects last 8, 9, 10 years. Even during that period, you know, you can destroy careers, you can destroy stakeholder confidence. So you've got to really think about it. And you can cheese off your customers. And my boss, Mike Brown, not only does he say he's not accepting bathtub, he doesn't even want a shower tray. You know, the minimum he wants is when you bring something in, it stays at least as good as the thing it's replacing. So this concept that people walk around with of, you know, well, bathtub, it's going to get a bit worse before it gets better, it's just no longer acceptable. We will not be allowed to bring in new technology, new upgrades, if we're going to degrade the operation of the railway. Look at those numbers. We just cannot afford to do it. Yeah, we'll be having people stuck in tunnels for hours. We just can't do it. So a big challenge to the industry is to design in reliability. Don't layer it on. I think another key issue is you bring more equipment onto trains. The trains themselves have to become more reliable to compensate for the increased equipment count. And being frank, I see little evidence of that in the industry. So you've got train suppliers over here, signalling suppliers over here. You need people who look at both and recognise that if you're going to put more kit on a train, the train itself needs to give you a reliability budget to allow for that increased equipment count. I think off-site testing with real simulators, and I've had this discussion for 20 years about the investment in simulators that are as close to reality as you can get, with a wide envelope of testing, as opposed to people think a simulator is just something that puts signals into bits of kit. You know, think about something that simulates train moves, non-communicating trains, junctions, driver errors, failed track circuits, failed axle counters, failed points. Think about those real situations, and the more you can put them into the simulator, the better off you'll be, and it'll pay for itself 1,000 times. And as a customer, I'm prepared to pay for that. I think leadership is something we don't speak about enough, but it's something, again, I think the industry historically has not been that good at. I think we need real leaders in the supply chain, in client teams, because you've got to be an integrator. You've got to integrate people, teams, equipment. You've got to be a real integrator. And finally, I think that given the plethora of, you know, modern applications everybody has on their smartphones and all that stuff, we're going to see a real revolution in customer communication information. And we've got to make sure that the kit we're providing keeps up with that. Yeah, because we're going to be, don't forget that product life cycle is 6 to 9 months when people are changing out their iPhones, their smartphones, their iPads, and the kit we put in the ground is there for 40 or 50 years. So we've really got to think about how we integrate and have backwards compatibility, because people want to take our vital information and communicate it to the world. Okay, that's me done. Thanks for listening.
Yes, Chris Jackson, Railway Gazette. You're talking about migrating in the longer term to 1 or 2 intercompatible signalling systems. At the moment, you've got 3 different suppliers putting 3 different new sets of kit in.
Yeah.
What's the sort of time scale on the convergence? Are we talking next generation or the one beyond that?
I think you've got to take it in stages. I mean, don't forget I was talking sort of 50 years off. I think I said that, which hopefully gets me out of trouble. But obviously failed there. Well, you've got to start with where we are. The subsurface is 4 railways. And for the first time, it's got 3 fleets and about 9 different types of signalling and 13 different signal cabins. So we're starting there with 1 train type, common front end, so we can look at interchanging crews across the lines, which we've never been able to do before. We've got one signalling system, so the maintenance and the diagnostics and the tooling up of that is much simpler. And one control system, one consolidated control centre. So that's the start, and that's, you know, depending on how you count it, 35 to 40% of our railway. Obviously, the Jubilee and Northern is of a type, although it's a different train set, but its signalling and control systems are of a type. And we're looking, when we bring the next generation around, the deep tube, to have one type of train, one type of signalling system, or if not, certainly that they are interchangeable and can talk to each other. And that's just where other railways are going. I know New York have tried that with Canarsie, and I know Paris are trying that. It's just obvious. It's obvious. You've got lots of lines. You don't want to have lots of different types, but it takes a long time and a vision to get there. The PPP did us no favours in that, but we're trying our best, but it will take time.
Do we have any other questions? I've got one for you, David. Is there any capacity now for London Underground to grow beyond its net where it is now, or is it competing with schemes like Crossrail, which are a slightly different proposition?
I don't think we'll ever compete, because I think the two are complementary. You need both. You know, the good news is people are talking about the Northern Line extension as becoming quite real. I mean, there's huge support for that scheme. As ever, the question is who pays for it and how it's paid. If I was a betting man, I'd say we go ahead, but we've got to find people who will back the money. And that will be a big scheme for South London and through to Battersea. The Croxley extension's been announced, so that's further north on the Met Line, and that's promoted by a local authority. So whether that, if it's successful, whether that encourages more local authorities who are on the outer fringes of London to start looking at how they can extend the railways, we'll always be a very willing partner for those. But obviously we can't fund that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, we've looked to the future. I would say that, as well as all the other stuff I've spoken about, how you pay for these upgrades and how you bring in private sector investment or third-party investment, commercialisation. But yeah, there's an appetite to grow it, sure. It's just a question of the money.
I've got one further question. Just give everybody else the opportunity to
Very quiet lot, aren't they?
They are. And there's not even a free bar, which is a surprise. So can you foresee, in your crystal ball going forwards, that there might be another transformational technology coming through that you'll have to embrace the next time round of major upgrades? Or do you think we've reached saturation in terms of the big advancements?
I think that the next, I think CBTC has moved forward enormously and is now seen as the industry standard. Every railway I go and talk to, CBTC is the sort of industry norm. So that's kind of becoming a standard now for modern signalling. I think there's going to be pressure to just increase headways. I don't know what the theoretical limit is. I mean, I talked to a few people in this room about this before. I'm talking about sustainable headways here, not things you can just achieve for sort of half an hour. I mean, if you stand on one of the busy Jubilee Line platforms now, or if you stood at Oxford Circus now and just counted the trains literally as one is leaving, you can see the headlights of the next one coming in. And the modern, to me, the vision I would have is of those trains coming in every, say, 60 seconds and literally just hoovering up the people so the platforms never got busy. For that, I think we need a paradigm shift in reliability, because that does imply far more trains than platforms, and we're just not there yet. And I think the other shift will be in customer information and also operational management. I think as the technology moves forward, so we have to move forward our operational and maintenance paradigm.
You said the future would, or Anne-Marie, I'm from Focon, doing
Hi.
customer information systems. What do you see that the customer information system would be in the future for example, London Underground?
That's an interesting question. We've, you know, we weren't embracing of things like Wi-Fi and stuff until quite recently. By the time the Olympics comes, we'll have approximately 100 stations. I think that's going to be quite a revolution for us, because suddenly our customers will have all, the kind of computing power they have on their phones now is phenomenal. You know, iPads, iPhones, Androids, all that stuff. So I think it's going to be quite interesting for us how they innovate with that stuff. I think, you know, some members of our staff will be using that stuff and may find it more informative and reliable than our traditional means of communication. That's certainly what other metros have found. It then gives you a challenge in what is the single source of truth if people have multiple channels to find information from. We're trying to integrate it onto our trains. I think this is a challenge for the industry. Question, why is it our customers are innovating efficiently and quickly with this information, yet you want to get that information through a signalling system or onto a train and you suddenly start talking about millions and years? And I think the more we can use that comms IT open platform to integrate our customer information for the non-vital systems, then that's, to me, is the big challenge. But I think it's going to be customer-led. Sorry to answer your question. I think the customers will decide what they want, when they want, because the apps will just be written, in 10 years' time, it'll all be done for us. So for us, the challenge will be, how do we choose what is the single source of truth with multiple sources of information?
You can have 2 questions if you wish.
Thank you, sir. It was to you said testing up front was important, and you talked about simulators. I see your organization a bit different than the average around the globe. But how do you convince the industry that testing up front and paying for simulators up front gives you a huge cost saving later?
That's another very good question. I think so far we've only partially succeeded in persuading the industry. I think as a client you have to specify it or give strong clues that that's what you want. You say things like you can't bring your products to the real railway till they've gone through validation off-site. If you can provide a test track, that's fine, but many times you can't. And I think you've got to talk about zero tolerance of reliability and disruption. And that way, smart suppliers will work out that what they've got to do is invest in simulators to test the stuff, because they can't use the railway. Because up to now, let's be frank, the railway's been used as a simulator. The railway's been used as a test bed. I mean, I can't think of any other explanation of why we've had 150 closures and, for a system that really is already working. So I think it's through those messages about how you contract it, how you buy it, and where you put the priorities. And I think as a client, we have to hold fast to those. As a supplier, you have to say, hey, these guys are serious and they want us to do this in a different way. I think it's the only way to achieve. I can't think of any other way to achieve this kind of zero closures, zero bathtub type of railway. But I think the industry has a long way to go, frankly. It's real simulators, not just black boxes with wires into them. Real. So you've got to write something around all the black boxes to simulate the railway.
I have one more question then, Dave, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Obviously, people around the world look towards London Underground for a lot of learning lessons. Everything is bigger and more difficult on the Underground. You mentioned 2 very important points, I think. So for a new railway that would be looking at advice of doing a major upgrade that maybe only comes around infrequently for them, you talked about leadership and you talked about the role as the system integrator. Would you say they are now the key things which have helped London Underground move through the PPP, where you've regained that ground from those contractual positions?
To an extent, yeah, but it's about leadership, not just in London Underground, but I mean, to be honest, I've always said this, I want the best people to be in my supply chain, because they're the ones who make this stuff. We specify it, we help do a lot of stuff ourselves, but I think the leadership has got to be spread between us and the supply chain. And I want real leaders, people who are prepared to stand up, be assertive, be confident, and give us the kit we want. But to an extent that hasn't been the case, yeah, we've had to fill the breach. We've got some very good people who've worked for us and who've led these teams, but I'm increasingly looking to the supply chain to stand up and fill that space. Partnership is not just us, it's the suppliers.
Right, thank you very much then, David.
Okay.
If we could just share our appreciation to David, thank you very much.